like to welcome a couple of special guests today. We've got Nick Norris, the Planning Director of Salt Lake City. He's going to be giving us a great presentation. We also have Tom Millar, formerly from Salt Lake City Transportation, now I believe with Parks and Public Lands. Good to see him here. And many ELPCO board members as well. I see Jeff Larson representing the East Emerson neighborhood, Christina Robb from West of East, Michael Alosi is one of our at-large members. You can actually check out the roster on the back of our agenda. That's got the complete list of all of the ELPCO members, as well as good contacts when you need to get in touch with Salt Lake City Services or law enforcement, even graffiti removal. We put that on there too. It's kind of like the magnet you put on your refrigerator. In this case, it's just our agenda. Okay, I think we probably can go ahead and get started. I just wanted to start off by reminding folks a little bit about the upcoming election that we've got going on. It's a midterm election, not quite getting as much attention as a presidential, but still quite important. And ELPCO, along with 9 other community councils, hosted a forum for many of our local candidates, 15 candidates in all, back in early October. Seems like a long time ago. It's October 3rd. But I'll be putting up that information about where you can actually go and watch that video and actually zoom into the candidates that you're most interested in. I'm putting that in the chat right now. We've got that on YouTube. School board, Salt Lake County Council, local state legislature. It's all in there, and hopefully that will be a good resource for you. It is vote by mail if you're new to Salt Lake City or Utah in general. And you have to postmark your ballots by the Monday before Election Day, or you can drop it off in person up until about 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock on Election Day at any of in-person voting location or a ballot drop box. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We normally go ahead with Salt Lake City Fire Department. Christina, do you see them on here? Or does anybody from Salt Lake City Fire want to raise their hand if they're there?
Jessie said that she'd try and send a battalion chief, but I mean, if they have a fire, they cannot come to our meetings.
we know they might be a little bit tired right now, yeah. But understandable that they've been busy. Of those of you who've heard about the fire down in downtown Sugar House, that was a 4-alarm fire, which means 4 different stations were involved there. Well, we understand they're busy. We appreciate what they're doing. Station 5 is our local fire station. It's based right there on 9th South. And stop by every once in a while. They won't make you wash the fire trucks, but they will give you a little tour, and they're always friendly and welcoming there. Let's move along then to the Salt Lake City Police Department. We have Detective Fallows here, and looks like actually no, yeah, we can move there. I do see. Is Rob Stafford? Are you with Salt Lake City Fire, or are you? I'm going to ask you to unmute, Mr. Stafford.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Are you with the fire department?
I am. I'm a battalion chief with Salt Lake City. So I was having some issues with the Zoom and the registration. I apologize.
No worries. I saw your shirt. That gave you away.
Yeah, good. I caught the last in and I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure he's talking about us, but I'm glad I got it on in time. Great.
Well, take it away, battalion chief. Let us know what the latest is from the fire department. We might have some questions too.
For sure, yeah, no, and I'm kind of the biggest news, especially with your district, is our reallocation of resources. This is something that we've recently done, and I know some of the community members in your district were initially concerned about, and I'd like to address some of those and certainly answer any questions, but also more importantly, kind of tell the whys of what we did. Historically, our downtown Station 1, which is at 500 East and 200 South, has had 2 heavy apparatus and then at times 1 heavy apparatus. Well, more recently, we've had 1 medic engine there staffed with 4 firefighters, 2 of which being paramedics. And Station 5, as you know, at 9th and 10th, essentially, has had a paramedic engine staffed with 4 and a truck staffed with 4. So due to the increasing call volume that we're starting to get downtown, as well as getting our trucks downtown with the aerial ladder on top, more reach for high-rise buildings, we have decided, but it's mostly due to call volume, but that has a component of it. We have switched those resources. So now we have medic engine 1, which was always there, but we have truck 1. And so now in your district at Station 5, we have Medic Engine 5. So from a paramedic standpoint and medical response standpoint, virtually nothing changes. From a truck standpoint, there's just a slightly longer response from a truck perspective, but now you have trucks coming in from the south from our Station 8, trucks coming in from the northwest at our Station 1, which is not very far away as far as a truck response for like a structure fire, for example. The benefit, in addition to that, we've also put in addition to Medic Engine 5, we now have Squad 5. So this is an apparatus staffed by 2 firefighter EMTs on a SUV essentially. And then the exciting new thing that we're doing that a lot of your constituents and citizens may have heard of is the CHAT program, or Community Health Access Team. This is our team of community health paramedics that basically have like a day schedule, but they can and work with our social workers that we've hired. This is a kind of an exciting new program with Salt Lake City Fire. This is meant to bridge the gap for a lot of the members in our community. Some of those members experiencing homelessness, as well as our residents and citizens that have been there for longer, that any kind of social worker need. It helps us with any mental health aspects of that, dealing with trauma, those types of things, all the way down to connecting the dots for resources for those that need those additional resources with housing, medications, healthcare, those types of things. We're trying to bridge that gap, and in fact that some of these things aren't emergent enough to go to a hospital, and sometimes that's not in their best interest because they're in and out of the ERs and they don't ultimately need to get the care that they need. So that's an exciting new program that we have, and they're actually based now out of Station 5 and then also out of our public safety building, our headquarters downtown on 30. So that's kind of how the reallocation was warranted, mostly by the call volume downtown, but then the benefit, I think, for the district, for District 5 for us, and then most specifically for your community council area, is that we have that chat program there, we have a squad there, and we still have the paramedic engine is there as well. So from a firefighting and a medical standpoint, you should see really no difference in the services provided. It's just a slight reallocation of resources for our people. That way, there's not one ALS apparatus that's taking the brunt of the call volume downtown. Now we can kind of redistribute that a little bit. As far as other news, we're kind of just really promoting from our safety message, kind of going into the winter is just kind of winter and heating element type safety as well. Just making sure that any kind of non-central air type heating sources, remove combustibles, those types of things, candles, removing combustibles away from those areas. We see an initial influx in structure fires and what we call room and contents fires, so content fires in structures due to heating elements and improper use of heating elements and or candles. So we're kind of just making sure for all of our citizens to be extra aware of that and to be safe with that as well. But yeah, so that's kind of our message, where our call volume is kind of continuing to increase. As many of the people in the city know, we've had a massive fire down on Highland Drive, just south of your district, and we still have firefighters on scene of that. So I'm happy to answer any questions for that too. But that is going to be a long, drawn-out fire scene with a long investigation that actually includes the ATF due to the dollar loss of that. And so it's quite an investigation scene at this point in time. But yeah, I think that's kind of our message for now. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Got it. Any questions for Chief Stafford? I have one quick one. It seems as if that fire down in Sugar House is still smoldering. Is that normal? Is that expected in terms of just how these structure fires work?
Yes, especially with a building like that. What that building is called a podium construction building. So you have basically concrete and steel on the first couple levels. It's incredibly popular construction type now, but then you have wood frame above that. And what happens with that when you get a building like that catches fire under construction, all those wood frame components of the structure itself are catching fire. And so that's what leads the fire to be so large so quickly. And in those fires, we can't do an offensive fire type, meaning putting our firefighters interior, because it's just too unsafe. And we also know there's no rescues involved. So therefore, we do a defensive operation. Well, when you have that, we do massive amounts of water. We're basically trying to protect the exposures, and we're kind of writing the building off, at least certain aspects of the building. So when you have that, you have these piles of all these combustible materials. Luckily, there wasn't a lot of contents in the building. It was mostly the building structure itself. but sometimes you can imagine that's a high fire volume, fire load. And so with that, you're going to have a lot of just smoldering fires. You really can't access all the nooks and crannies in the pile, essentially, especially now that they're doing the demo process. And then part of another kind of component of that makes us hit pause at times is if we don't have access into the areas where the fire is, sometimes we have to let the fire burn in order to be able to extinguish it. It's kind of ironic, but you have to kind of eat up some of those components in order to get access for even water application. And then the other component that slows us down in these situations is when you do have a large investigation that we'll have with our Fire Prevention Bureau as well as the ATF. A lot of times they want us to hit pause on certain things to be able to start the investigation in that area before we do more damage. So all those components kind of lead to a very long, drawn out scene. But if you do see smoke off and on, and even fire off and on, just be rest assured that since the fire started 2 nights ago at 11:30 at night, we've had our fire apparatus or more on scene the entire time. So we're well aware, and a lot of those are within the strategies that we're trying to accomplish.
Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I got disconnected there for a minute. My question is, I live pretty darn close to the fire, at least for ELPCO standards. I live like just north of Westminster. So we woke up to a whole bunch of like soot ash in our yard. And I guess my question is like, how hazardous is that for like me and my kids and pets? I'm just kind of cleaning it up with gloves, but I just making sure I'm not being foolish.
No, that's a great question. And it's a question we've got a lot through our dispatch and through our emergency management division. So our message for that is basically clean it up the way you're doing it. When you clean it up, we're advising to use gloves and like an N95 mask that unfortunately we all have nowadays. So use those things just to, any of those products, most of the products that you're going to breathe at a small acute level is probably not going to do any harm. But anybody, especially with previous lung history like asthma, COPD, those types of things, it's going to obviously maybe take a hit to them a little bit more. However, we would rather have you have zero exposure. So if you use gloves of some sort, a mask of some sort, sweep it up. If it's something that you still think is hot, put it into a bucket with water and cool it down, and then you can throw it away in your normal trash.
I'll show you a piece of it if you want to see what I'm talking about. It's not like I saved this one because it was particularly big, but
yeah. Oh yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. Exactly. So, and at this point in time, that is certainly cooled off enough that you can just dispose of it normally. So there's
I'm not
nothing
wearing
special
gloves as I pick it up.
yeah. So if you don't wear gloves, no, you're good. If you don't wear gloves and you're not feeling like you're getting some of the debris that starts to kind of get into more of an ash type thing, it's probably not going to get into your lungs as much as well. But as a general message, glove up, mask up, make sure it's cooled off, which at this point in time, most of it will be. Initially, when the fire was starting, that was definitely a part of our message. So, because we certainly didn't want people throwing away hot materials into their garbage and then starting a whole nother problem. So, but overall, I think you're fine with normal disposal. And then, just wash your hands really well, wash your face if you think you got that on you. But most of the materials, as I talked about before, when it's the structure itself, a lot of these are just what we call Class A materials, kind of normal wood. So it's almost like a giant campfire, if you will. Now, the fire obviously got into some of the roofing materials, and then you're getting into the plastics of the membrane. That's obviously not great to ingest or inhale into your body at all. So that's why we're trying to just do those kind of standard precautions.
Okay.
Thanks.
You got it.
Chief Stafford, for coming by, giving us the latest on what's happening at Station 5, and also answering some of our questions about the most recent big fire. We appreciate what you do out there, running towards the fire instead of running away. That's what you guys do.
That's right. That's what we do. And I appreciate having me on, and I appreciate your time. Feel free to reach out with any other questions as you guys move forward.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Let's move from Salt Lake City Fire to Salt Lake City Police. We have Detective Fallows here, the local liaison for District 5 and for ELPCO. Thank you for being here, Detective Fallows. You're all good on the audio?
Yep, all good.
Great. Do you want me to load up the presentation, or do you want to do a little talk first?
I'm just going to go over a couple things real quick, and then we can load it up. So just wanted to, I'm going to put a bunch of links into the chat like I normally do when we do the online meetings. Just as a kind of a general thing, everything we talk about can be found on the SLCPD website under our stats section. So everything that Jason, Christina get from me, I get from our website and sent to them directly. Something unique to ELPCO is that we keep track of like all the part 1 and part 2 crimes here on a kind of ongoing basis. So something kind of cool that you guys can see each month that we go through it. But you can also find that online as well. And then just a reminder to everybody about the SLC mobile app. Something that Jason mentioned was graffiti. You can also use the SLC mobile app to report graffiti, and they're pretty quick about getting it removed when you do utilize the app for that. So not only can you use it to report concerns regarding homelessness, things like that, but also down stop signs in your neighborhood, speeding complaints, graffiti. There's lots of things you can use it for. Sometimes we get like abandoned shopping carts, things like that in the neighborhoods. You can use it to report all those things. So, but just want to reiterate that it does not take place of reporting a crime to the Salt Lake City Police Department. So if there's a crime that is happening, please call either our dispatch or go to our website, slcpd.com, and file an online report through there. So that's different than the SLC mobile app. It's a little confusing, but those two things are different. So to have an accurate picture of the stats for the neighborhood and for what's actually going on, we want to see people report the crimes that are occurring in their neighborhoods. And so I know a lot of people like to use Nextdoor and things like that. If you can take a moment to also just report it to us. We do not monitor Nextdoor. We don't have a way to pull stats from Nextdoor. So it is really helpful for us to be able to allocate resources to your neighborhood when we have the actual stats that are going on. So with that, and then also while I'm talking, if anybody has a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can wait till the end. I'll take questions as well, but feel free to put in the chat while I'm speaking. But go ahead and throw that up there, Jason, if you'd like. Perfect. So so we can see that kind of the top. So, and again, so these are all the part 1, part 2 offenses. Well, not all these, but there's a lot, there's a lot of them, but the part 1 and part 2 offenses here. Something we see quite a bit of generally in this neighborhood are thefts and larcenies. And that goes to that can be any type of theft that's not a burglary. So a burglary is a structure, something that's stolen from a structure like your home, your garage, your shed. A theft is anything other than that, including your vehicle. So like vehicle theft from your vehicle, things like that. So there were 17 of those this month, or in the month of September. There were 6 motor vehicle thefts. On that note, just as reminders, we're coming into the cold season. Please do not leave your vehicles warming up, the keys in it. We tend to see the motor vehicle thefts go up quite a bit during the winter season, just because people warm up their vehicles. So super important to just try and make sure that we are taking precautions to not become victims of that. It's not fun to lose your car, and generally when you get it back, it's not generally in the same condition you lost it in. So just make sure that as we're coming into the cold season, we're not doing that. And then again, burglary and vandalisms, we had 4 of each of those. So you can kind of see there's a lot of theft type related are kind of our major top calls, motor vehicles, burglaries, and larcenies. So it's just a great reminder. Make sure we're trying to lock up our things, take anything of value out of our vehicles, take anything of value that's in plain sight. Make sure we're closing our garages at night, locking our doors, things like that. Just taking all the small little precautions to make sure that we're not giving people the opportunity to try and take our property. So let me look at the others. We can go, if you want to go to the last one, Jason. It's just kind of an overall of the last 5 months. You can kind of see, again, properties up at the top, and then we have like the nuisance type calls, the alcohol impaired, and the sexual reports. So again, property is probably one of the biggest things we see in a lot of our communities, and it just goes back to what we just talked about, basically. So I believe that's all I have for the numbers. Does anybody have any questions for me specifically that I can answer for you, or anything you'd like to bring to my attention that I can kind of follow up on for you, Christina?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for coming, Detective Follows. We really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
I have a question. There has been a couple of car thefts actually on my street recently. And, you know, the police came, took reports, but there are Ring doorbell video that folks in the neighborhood would like to submit of, you know, suspects. How do we know when we upload to the website how that's going to get attached to the right car theft or just, you know, crime in general?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, you should get a case number when you make an initial report. And if sometimes officers forget to give it to you, so just make sure you ask for the actual case number if they don't give it to you.
Okay.
And then with that case number, if you have any kind of follow-up information, especially if it's like video, I feel the best way to do that is probably call and have an officer send you a link. And is that what you're talking about, the Axon link?
Well, yes, but in this case, the person who had their car broken into did not get a case number. So do we just call the department to try and get a case number to get the link open?
So they made a report and then the officer sent them a link to upload the video? Or
Yes,
no?
but then they no longer have access. They just don't remember what the case
Okay.
number was.
Gotcha. So you can call our dispatch number,
Mhm.
which is the 801-799-3000. It's up in the chat.
Okay.
And then they can give their name and say they're trying to find their case number from a stolen vehicle report.
Okay.
And our dispatch can usually look that up and give you the case number. And then with that, you can also talk to them. You can just tell them at the same time, like, well, I have a video I need to upload again and I don't have the link.
Okay.
Can I have an officer resend me the link? Or you can also reach out to me as well if you have my contact info. I can kind of help with that too if you need it. So,
Okay.
but in general, yeah, it's probably easiest just call dispatch. They can get you your case number again because everything will be under the victim's name. We'll be able to find a case number that way for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then on that, actually, as a good reminder too, if your vehicle is stolen and you happen to find it, which does happen from time to time, and you were able to get it back, which would be phenomenal if that happens, and you can safely get in your car and get away without like getting hurt. If you see your vehicle, call 911 immediately and let them know where it is, where you are. And if you're able to get in your vehicle safely and no one's around and you're able to drive away in your vehicle safely, drive away a couple of blocks or somewhere safe, maybe like a park or somewhere that's public, and then call the police as well and let them know that you've recovered your vehicle. But we need to know because your vehicle is still going to be listed stolen. So if you're driving home in your vehicle and I happen to get behind you and you're the unlucky driving home and I run your plate and I'm like, oh, here we go, it's a stolen vehicle, and I pull you over and point guns and things like that, we don't want that to happen, and it has happened. So just as a great reminder that we're on this subject, just pull, if you are able to get your vehicle back, pull over, stop, call the police, let them know, and don't move until we've been able to remove the vehicle off of we call it NCIC is what the national database is called. So
Perfect. That's great advice.
reminder.
Any other questions for Detective Fallows? Gotcha. We got a question. What is the name of the mobile SLC app mentioned earlier, please?
So it is, and I'll just throw it in the chat for everybody, but it's literally SLC MOBILE. That's the name of it. So if you go to
SLC mobile app. Okay.
If you just go, if you go to any app store, I believe, either one of them, and just type in SLC mobile, and then you just download it, and you create a little account, and you can submit a service request. Perfect. Thank you, Councilman Mano. Yeah, that's a good little link right there. You can, it's a really versatile app that helps us a lot, be able to kind of, when we're trying to track, or even if you see someone who's experiencing homelessness and you think, hey, I want to get them some resources, it's also a good way to do that too, because essentially we get those incoming, the incoming requests, and then we're able to kind of send out our city teams to go out and engage them, get them resources, offer them help, lots of different things. So it's great for all those, for that too as well. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it. Appreciate it, Detective Fowle. Thanks for coming by, giving us the data, and letting us talk. So let's move on. I do want to mention that we do have Council Member Mano in the audience. He's already helping us out, supplying information there. We are going to go to Josh Rebello from the Salt Lake City Mayor's office first, and then we're going to transfer over to the councilman, but I just wanted to mention that he is here. Josh, you are here from the Mayor's office, and you have, I believe, Mason, who's going to share a screen or do a presentation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Can you hear me all right? Okay, good. Yeah, so I do have a presentation from our Public Lands Department about the open space bond, the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond that I'm going to be sharing. And then quickly at the end, just also plugging a survey from regarding housing SLC and thriving in place. So we'll get through this one first, and then happy to answer questions after. So I'm just going to stop sharing my video and continue on through this presentation. A lot of you probably know at least something about this bond. So yeah, we'll get through this and answer any questions. So next slide, please. So this November, the city voters will have the opportunity to vote on the Parks, Trails, and Open Space General Obligation Bond. It provides the opportunity to build on existing investments in enhancing our public land system. And if it's passed, the city will plan to fund 8 significant projects as shown in this map across the city. Next slide. So this bond funding, if approved, will implement components of the Reimagine Nature Master Plan. The highlights include constructing a new regional park in Glendale at the old Raging Waters Water Park site on 1700 South. Creating new parks, including playgrounds and trails in Glendale and the Granary District, where there are currently very few green spaces. Update aged facilities, and for at least one neighborhood park per council district, have improvements in one neighborhood park per council district. Complete the connection of the Folsom Trail to the Jordan River Parkway Trail to improve east-west connections, and increasing the city's tree canopy and plant biodiversity. For each of these projects, there will be comprehensive community engagement to determine the final design and implementation for each project. And so, yeah, next slide. So planning and other steps for some of these projects have been outlined. The Glendale Regional Park Vision Plan is available to view online. If you search Glendale Regional Park Vision Plan, you can see the renderings and vision for that. Allen Park Adaptive Reuse and Management Plan is anticipated to begin this fall and will include a public engagement process to help identify opportunities for priority improvements this bond could fund. And Liberty Park Playground and Jordan River enhancements will begin also if this bond is approved. Next slide. Just wanted to highlight the Liberty Park improvement given the community at ELPCO. So this particular project in the bond has $2 million set aside, intending to replace aging, out of date, but still heavily used Rotary Playground area in the northwest part of Liberty Park. New state-of-the-art assets are planned to honor the site's popularity and community preferences. And this new playground would be customized for Liberty Park to serve kids of all ages, utilizing accessible design and assistive technologies. So that is one of the ones that you can look forward to close in the ELPCO neighborhood, as well as, Allen Park is relatively close as well. So let's go to the next one, please. So the why of this bond, why it's being considered. Currently, 26% of the city's general fund budget comes from property taxes. Of that, $18 million is allocated to fund public lands, much of which is directed to the maintenance of the existing system, and a lot of assets in that system are beyond a reasonable level of maintenance. In addition, the city has grown by 7% over the last decade, adding approximately over 13,000 new residents. And so there is a need for additional acres of green space to avoid overcrowding in our existing parks and trails. Next slide, please. If the bonds are approved, the estimated property taxes to pay for it would be about $53.80 per year, less than $5 a month for an average primary residence, valued at $576,000, and $97.83 per year for a business or a secondary residence of the same value. And next slide. So we invite everyone, you should have received your ballot if you're registered to vote in Salt Lake City. You can find out more information about the projects for the bond at slcparksbond.com. And next slide. Finally, you can follow Public Lands on social media. Also, you can email parksbond@slcgov.com with any questions that you might have to direct to Public Lands and slcparksbond.com. And there's a phone number as well. So that is my presentation there for the bond, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Anybody have questions for Josh about the GO bond, the Parks bond that's on your ballot right now? You can also type them in the chat if you'd like to do that. We can cover them further along. There is a constitutional amendment on the ballot. That is not this, right? This is something that is specifically Salt Lake City. Is that right?
Right. This would only be on Salt Lake City's ballots. I'll just add to, if there's questions later on, I would be able to answer those. Or also we have Tom Millar on the meeting, who is from Public Lands and would also be equipped to answer any questions that might come up about it. I do see a question coming in through the chat. Will this funding go towards micro parks as well? And actually, Tom, would you like to address that?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Robert. The project that Josh talked about at the beginning of the presentation that would fund at least one park improvement in each council district, that park per council district has not been selected yet. And so if there are one or two or more micro parks that the community and that the council and mayor would like to improve, absolutely. It's sort of a park of any size that comes from the input that we receive and the goals and priorities of the Public Lands Master Plan could be eligible for that project. And there's about $10.5 million for that specific project. Obviously, it'll produce at least 7 parks improvements because it's one per council district, but it doesn't rule out more than one, just as long as we can utilize all of that funding that's proposed.
Yeah, the only challenge is those micro parks will be funded only with pennies and nickels. That's just how it is. Sorry, they're micro. Any other questions? Gotcha. So that is on our ballot, and definitely take a look and give it some strong consideration. Josh,
Yes.
do you have an additional presentation from the mayor's office, some other information you want to cover?
Yeah, so thank you, Mason, for sharing your screen there. We can go ahead and I'll come back to me here. So yeah, in addition to the needs of our growing city with regard to open space and green space and, being addressed by this bond, there's been a lot of conversation about housing, the need of addressing affordability and displacement. And to that end, the city had the Thriving in Place study, which was done with partners at the U of U and through a consultant as well. And then currently our Housing Stability Division is working on the Housing SLC plan, which is a 5-year plan for housing, which is required by state law to address housing needs. And so helping us as some of our partners at the University of Utah and the College of Planning, City and Metropolitan Planning. And so there was a survey that these students created, these graduate students created, to gain the insights of the East Liberty Park community. And that is in the chat. Let me just ask one of those students who is on this call right now, Vincent, if you want to share real quick in a minute what that survey is about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. Just to give this a really basic summary. So we're part of a class on community engagement and planning. And as part of that class, one of the students is presenting in at least every community council across the city to get feedback on the housing SLC plan that we'll pass off to the city. Which will be hopefully incorporated into that plan. And so unfortunately, the schedule for this this community council meeting was already filled up. But thank you, Josh, for giving us just a minute. So we've made a survey instead of creating a group discussion. That's in the chat. It was also posted on the Facebook. So thank you so much for whoever did that. And then my classmates, Leticia and Julie, are also on this call too. So if you have any questions, you can direct that to us. But we would love for you to fill out the survey as well as review the flyer that Julie just sent in the chat. But thank you so much, Josh.
Great, thanks, Vincent. And yeah, so I'd encourage everyone to take advantage of that opportunity, take that survey, give your thoughts. It's a very short survey. And everyone has thoughts, I think, on affordable housing and our affordability crisis. So good opportunity there. So yeah, and I think I saw something in the chat. It might have been related to the bond. Is Liberty Park's playground considered D5 micro park improvement or a separate thing? Tom, would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tom
The
can
Liberty
do it.
Park playground improvement is a separate standalone project. It doesn't mean that other improvements to Liberty Park couldn't be included under that project number 2, Reimagine Neighborhood Parks. But no, that does not take up District 5's neighborhood park improvement. That's its own project.
Great, thank you. And that's all I have for now, for me. So Jason, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Josh. We did put the link to the survey. It's a 2-question survey, so it's really easy. You know, how often do you get a 2-question survey? So definitely go ahead and do that. Let folks know about the Thriving in Place proposals, especially on affordable housing. And now Christina Robb is going to take over the rest of the meeting. Christina.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Christina and I currently represent the West and East neighborhood here in ELPCO, but I'm learning to be the new chair of ELPCO, and Jason has been helping me extensively. It's been great. So I'd like to welcome our District 5 Councilman, Darren Mano. Hi, Darren. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Christina. I just popped in the chat a list of several things that the council is currently considering or recently considered or adopted, or other things that are currently on our agendas. So if any of those things are of interest to anyone, feel free to pop in the chat or unmute and ask me questions about those. I'll read through the list and then I'll just start talking about some of them unless people stop me and say they want to talk about others. First, I do want to just follow up on the bond that was just discussed. I think as city staff members, as city employees, Josh and Tom are not allowed to necessarily advocate for the bond, but as an elected official, I have slightly different rules. So I'm going to say, please, my hope is that the bond will pass. And I'm hopeful that we can make those investments in our parks and our open spaces throughout the city. I know that it's always a sensitive subject to ask residents to pay more in property taxes. And I know that there are members of our community that for whom that will be a difficult thing, but I hope that for most of us, we can look at $53-ish a year as a really good investment in better open space throughout the city. We worked really hard to kind of narrow the list of projects down. The mayor gave us a list of projects. We tweaked a few things. We worked really hard to make sure that it's something that would benefit everyone in the city. So hopefully, I'm hopeful that the bond will pass, and I'm asking you to please invest in our parks. Other things that are currently, we just passed the Other Side Village, both zoning and contract. That's the tiny home village for chronically homeless. But ballpark station area plan was just passed. That's the master plan for around the baseball stadium and the track stop. Inland Port Authority contract with Salt Lake City, it was approved by the council and the RDA board, and so the mayor, I believe, has already signed that. We have some funding from our ARPA grants that we have been kind of a special round of funding for community organizations. We're currently considering stealth cell phone towers ordinance, which is those cell phone towers that are disguised as something else. We just passed the 2022 Salt Lake City Department of Airports Master Plan and a budget amendment. Actually, we passed the budget amendment for some things at the airport. I believe we're still working on the airport's master plan. But that's something we've been discussing recently. We talked about the geo bond. And then last week we had a really big week last week, actually. And then 3 things that we passed that have been kind of around for multiple years: off-street parking, shared housing, and RMF 30 are things that were on our agenda recently. So there's a big list. Does anyone want me to jump into any of those, or I'll just pick my favorites?
Well, I'd like to say something in that, tonight we do have the planners here with us, and we're kind of focusing on that. So we were kind of hoping that maybe you tell us, why you voted to pass the off-street parking ordinance, shared housing, and the RMF 30 zoning ordinances. What were your ideas behind your choices there?
Thanks for the question, Christina. Yeah, those were what we recently, a few months ago, got a midpoint update on the Thriving in Place study. That's the study about displacement and gentrification in our city. We all have known that gentrification and displacement has been happening, but the results of the study were surprising even to us, or at least me, that it's actually perhaps worse than we even realized. And we've had these 3 ordinances, all in some ways would help increase the supply of housing in our city, which would then help us help people stay in the city. And those are the 3 that have been sitting on our plate that have been ready to be adopted, but for one reason or the other, each of them have been sitting around for a really long time. And we as a council, me as the vice chair with Chair Dugan, decided it's really time for us to just move on some of these things. We, of course, would love to wait for a comprehensive package of all of the ordinances that are being discussed or thought about. But we felt it was more important for us to act on something and move forward with some of these housing initiatives. So those are the reasons why it was scheduled when it was and why we decided to move them all forward.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Let's look at the chat.
Quiet bunch today.
Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. Do you want to talk to anything else before we move on?
I'll just mention the other one that we passed, which was the ballpark station area plan. I know that that's a little bit of ways from ELPCO, but still in District 5. I'm really excited about that. It kind of sets the tone for the ballpark neighborhood and how that will change and grow in the future. It's very forward thinking, really focusing on the areas around the 13th South Track Station and making that more of a walkable business node. So my hope is that in a few years, it will be one of the places that is a regional draw, not just because there's a baseball stadium there, but for 365 days a year, there's other things to come to besides Lucky 13. That's maybe the one thing that exists in the neighborhood that people kind of know about and might travel from Sandy to come to, but otherwise there's I think a ton of potential in that neighborhood. So I'm excited to see what comes from that, and I'm glad that we were able to pass that.
Great. I recently did a little tour of the Furniture Row. So the vintage furniture and antique stores are kind of popping up there. It's a great place to visit in Ballpark right now. So, all right. Does anyone else have any questions? Jason, do you see anything?
No, I think we're good. Everyone's really excited to get into the nitty gritty of planning and zoning. It's great.
Excellent.
We're such
All right.
nerds here.
Well, thank you, Councilman. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay. Well, Well, now we are moving on to the exciting part of our meeting tonight, and we're lucky to have 3 individuals from the planning department with us. Nick Norris, of course, leads their planning department, and we also have Kelsey Lindquist, as well as Michael. And Michael, I'm sorry, I struggle with your name a little bit. I haven't heard it pronounced. You want to tell us how you say it?
Sure, it's McNamee, and I understand your struggle.
Okay, well, welcome to all of you. And I want to invite our audience to make sure that you, hold your questions to the end, but feel free to put them in the chat. Let these guys get through their presentation. We're excited that they have prepared this for us.
All right. So thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm Nick Norris. I'm the planning director for Salt Lake City. Tonight, we're going to cover a bunch of things that are mostly related to housing that we've been working on. And Councilmember Mono touched on some of these that the council adopted last week. But we were asked to give kind of an overview of what that means and some kind of basic details. And then we wanted to cover some things that are working their way to the council that have been through the planning commission, and then a couple other things that are in progress. So we will be kind of tag teaming this presentation because we've all had different roles on these different projects. And so when we get to each other's things, we'll let those people talk. But first, we want to talk about things that are approved by the council last week, so people know what they are. They're really, for us, there's the 3 big text changes that we refer to. One is shared housing. I'm going to go into more detail on each. We're going to go into more detail on these. So shared housing, some zoning changes to the RMF 30 zoning district, and then some off-street parking changes. And then Michael will talk about ADUs after we get through this. But I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey because she has a hard stop at 8, but I'll be able to answer any questions that come up after. So Kelsey, just let me know how you want to proceed with it.
Yeah. Would you like me to share the presentation, or would you like to, Nick? You probably should, maybe.
I have it. Yeah, let me.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me share that real quick. I have it up.
Yeah, and sorry about my hard stop. I thought it would be okay with the agenda, but I see that we have a short amount of time, so I'll be as brief as possible. So I was one of the project managers well, let me start over. My name is Kelsey Lindquist. I'm one of the planning managers with the planning division. And I was one of the project managers for RMF 30, which was just adopted last Tuesday. It was adopted with a delay in publication of the ordinance by 180 days. That means that these changes will not be effective for 6 months. And so that means that somebody could not come in if they owned an RMF 30 property and develop under these new regulations. We still are running under the current regs for RMF 30 for another 180 days. So the real goal of the RMF 30 amendments was to treat the RMF 30 like it was the purpose statement for the RMF 30, and for it to function truly like a lower scale multifamily district. What had been happening since it was adopted was primarily encouraging just single family development. So what we wanted to do was create that gentle density and infill with these changes. So we addressed the big barriers, which were the lot minimums. That includes square footage and then lot width as well. So we reduced both of those so that we could create additional units within the RMF 30. And then to address some of the public concerns for potential loss of naturally occurring affordable housing or historic structures, we introduced a unit density bonus. So how did we get there with these changes? We realized that 82% of all of the RMF 30 lots in the city were not actually eligible to have multifamily, meaning they didn't meet the lot minimums in our current RMF 30 regulations to construct a multifamily structure. The Salt Lake City ordinance determines multifamily as 3 or more units. And you'll see on this screen, our current regulations that are still in place required a minimum of 9,000 square feet of lot area for 3 units. It's quite significant. So what we did is we have reduced that to 2,000 for multifamily, single family duplexes, and then we proposed a new use for cottages and tiny homes at 1,500 square feet. Next slide. And then the lot widths were also a significant barrier. So in correlation with the minimum area of the 9,000 square feet or 5,000 for a single family, we also required 50 feet of lot frontage of width. We discovered that the majority of the RMF 30 lots actually didn't meet this requirement. And so we eliminated lot width minimums, and we introduced a lot width maximum to try to discourage land banking in these areas. Next slide. Oh, and then that's yours. So let me just touch really briefly on the density bonus for preservation of a structure. So in response to a lot of the community concerns of the loss of historic structures or maybe historic housing, which is oftentimes considered more affordable and attainable, we introduced a unit bonus if you keep that structure, that unit, and say you want to add an additional unit to your property, you would, and you're retaining the existing structure and unit, you would be eligible for a unit bonus. We have those ratios broken down by types and number of units already located on the property. And I believe it's going to hopefully be quite effective in retaining a lot of those structures that we wish to keep. So that's my part, and I'll turn it back over to Nick to talk about shared housing.
Thanks, Kelsey. Oh, hang on. I can't get my presentation to really go backwards for some reason, but there we go. So shared housing was also adopted by the City Council last week. Let me briefly explain what this is. It's essentially just like many of us who ever lived in an apartment or rented a single family home with roommates. It's that exact same thing, only on a larger scale and bigger buildings. And so this is a type of use where in our case, there'll be a number of sleeping rooms that can share a kitchen and or a bath. So the regulations that were adopted by the council require 1 kitchen for every 4 sleeping rooms, and no more than 2 sleeping rooms can share 1 bath. So these are both market rate and affordable housing types. They're commonly and historically known as single room occupancy, although modern versions are much different than what they were in the past, to create a more, livable type of situation. But what this proposal did, it added some standards. You can see those on the screen, and I'm not going to read each one of those in the interest of time. But it expanded where in the city this use is allowed. This map shows all the different colors of the zoning districts where this use is now a permitted use. Well, once this ordinance is published, which should happen any day now. But I think the most significant thing is that prior to this being adopted, most of the land where this could be built was along the North Temple corridor or along Redwood Road. And hardly any of it was east of I-15. As you can see with the changes, we greatly expanded on the east of I-15 where this use could go, including downtown. I think it surprises many people that this was not an allowed use in most of our downtown and large zoning districts. So why do we do it? One, this is just one tool in our housing toolbox, but it removes a significant zoning barrier particularly for permanent supportive housing, which is a key to helping people transition out of homelessness. And we were really limited on where that could occur. And so this greatly expanded that to more parts of the city. It does increase housing choice. There are market rate shared housing apartment buildings, basically, that people have been building in other cities. We've had actually a couple people approach us about building them in Salt Lake, although that was pre COVID, and we don't know that necessarily this will be happening, but at the market rate level. But we know that we need to allow this type of housing in our city to help, particularly the lowest and deeply affordable housing options. I don't know that anybody will be able to type that link, but this is a link from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness that talks about this type of housing and how effective it is. It also provides some examples so people can look at it and learn how it's worked in other places. Another significant code change, this is probably the largest code change the city has done since we adopted our current zoning ordinance in 1995. But it was a complete rewrite of our off-street parking regulations. The goals for this, you can see them here, basically was to primarily align off-street parking requirements with access to other modes of travel. So transit, cycling, walking, etc. And fix some of the issues that our old parking ordinance has, just like similar to the RMF 30, this ordinance is a little bit different when it goes into effect. It goes into effect upon publishing, but for 4 months, people can, especially when they're in the development process, can choose to either use the prior parking regulations or this parking regulations. That is done primarily so people don't get caught up in a change in code when they have already started investing all their money in plans and everything else, but maybe they don't have full approvals yet. And so it has a built-in 4-month option for people to choose which one works to avoid those kinds of situations where the code changes and they're caught off guard by that. Again, big purpose of this was simplifying the regulations. We had a lot of issues and complications with our prior code. Some of you may have experienced this when projects have been presented to this community council. And, for example, for like a restaurant, there was such a low minimum requirement and the maximum was based off a percentage of that. Oftentimes new restaurants couldn't even provide parking for even half their staff on any shift. And so that was a big focus, was trying to correct some of those errors in our code. And also, like I said, align it primarily with transit. So one of the big things is that the areas in red on this map, some of these already did not have a minimum parking requirement, but we expanded the areas that new development, changes of use, when a restaurant's built or a retail store or an office building, if they basically now in these red zones do not require any minimum off-street parking. There are certain housing types that have been built in the city in zones that didn't require minimum that have built none. Most still build parking, however. And then the areas in green are areas where the minimum has been lowered. The blue areas also have some minor changes. You'll see the 9th and 9th business district there. Most of those changes were actually to the maximums, like I said, and so increasing those so that there's more flexibility and we aren't unnecessarily limiting some really great businesses from being located in our neighborhoods where we want them, especially when they're local. So it also includes some reductions for affordable and senior housing for those uses that the occupants tend not to use or have cars. Like I said, no minimum does not mean no parking will be provided. And almost every instance in the city where no minimum has been required for at least 10 years now, we've only had maybe 4 or 5 projects. Most of those are housing projects in the Central Ninth neighborhood that are lower scale, 4 stories that have not provided parking. So they are required to provide ADA accessible parking, but otherwise they haven't. So this allows some flexibility for people to, if they to choose where, if they want a car or not, and to choose housing where they don't need to necessarily pay for parking. Next up, we're going to talk about ADUs, and I'm going to let Michael, who was the project manager on this, give a quick overview of those changes.
Thanks, Nick. So my name is Michael McNamee. I'm a principal planner with the Planning Division. And like Nick said, I've been the project manager for the city's proposed changes to the ADU ordinance. So just to give you some background, the current ADU ordinance, and ADU is short for accessory dwelling unit. The current ordinance was passed in 2018. And since that time, the production of ADUs has sort of underperformed the city's expectations. And so recognizing that ADUs are an important addition to a diverse housing stock, the city is taking this opportunity to propose some changes that would hopefully strike a better balance between making it easier to build ADUs and still mitigating potential impacts on neighboring properties. So to just give you sort of the high level view of what the big changes are. So right now, detached ADUs, which are the small apartments that are built in separate buildings, either in a standalone building or generally above like a garage in someone's backyard. If you're in a single family residential zoning district, those require what's called a conditional use, which is essentially an extra layer of approval where you have to go to the planning commission and they'll take a vote on whether or not to approve it. We are proposing to eliminate that. The state legislature passed a law last year that made attached ADUs, so the mother-in-law apartments, basement apartments, permitted. And so it's just those detached ADUs require that conditional use now. And so that was identified as a significant barrier to ADU construction. Another change is allowing ADUs in more than just residential districts. So in any zone in the city that already allows other types of residential, we're proposing to also allow ADUs. And then as part of that, also expanding the type of principal use that an ADU can be attached to. So right now it has to be a single family home. We're proposing to expand that so you can build an ADU on a property that has a duplex or multifamily use or a commercial use. We're also proposing to make some adjustments to the development standards for ADUs, increasing the maximum allowable size. And so that was actually changed by the Planning Commission when this went to a hearing last month. So they proposed that we increase that allowable size to 1,000 square feet to accommodate for more family-sized units, to help provide that more affordable option for families. So that maximum is proposed to be 1,000 square feet. If you're in a residential zone and your lot is smaller than 12,000 square feet, for other lots, it would be 1,200 square feet would be the allowable maximum. And then we're also carrying over a requirement or an allowance for parking not to be provided if the ADU is close to transit or if there's on-street parking available in front of the property. Also making some other changes just to make the ordinance easier to understand for the public and for staff. So to give you an update on the process, like I mentioned, this was brought to the Planning Commission for a vote in September at their September 14th hearing, and they voted to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council with the condition that we increase the allowable maximum size. And so we are in the process of transmitting those proposed changes to the city council. Once that happens, the city council will decide when they want to hear it and vote on whether or not to make those changes.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the other things that are upcoming. So one, I know Kelsey's still here, but Kelsey was supposed to leave. So I'm gonna make her leave so she can go have a personal life, live her life. And I'm going to cover this. This was one of Kelsey's projects, but this was basically a proposal to address and update downtown building heights. The primary reason for this was to align our zoning requirements for height in the downtown area to match the construction types in building codes. And so we carried over a lot of different things, but we also made some adjustments. For those that don't know, in the central business district, there actually is no maximum height that was carried over, but there are two in the current code. There were two thresholds where it required design review to address the impacts of height. Those were consolidated into only one, so that corner lots and mid-block lots are treated the same. In some other zones, like around the intermodal hub in Salt Lake Central Station, we increased the building heights up to 180 feet in that area. And then in some of the edges of downtown, particularly west of 200 East, there were also some changes. But we did this as well with some caveats. So buildings over a certain height either have to include one of four things. They either have to include affordable housing as part of that, a mid-block walkway, which really helps address our connectivity downtown and makes our downtown more livable. Many of these mid-block walkways also, as you can see in this picture of a building under construction, also become fire access roads, which, as we learned and witnessed a couple of days ago, are really important for big, tall buildings. And so those are required anyway. And so we felt like, well, if we can get those to be also served in mid-block walkways, then it's a win-win for people. Or they can include publicly accessible outdoor space, or 100% of the ground floor of their building at the street being commercial. So we have a number of other things that are going to be next up at the Planning Commission. Some are already in progress. And I noticed on the agenda that Jason was going to talk about the Homeless Resource Center related zoning code. So I have some slides on that at the end if we need them, but I'm not going to talk about that until Jason does. And if he needs any help from us, then we'll participate. But I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple other big things that are in various stages. The first are the affordable housing incentives. Some of you may know that this is something that went to the Planning Commission earlier this year. There's a lot of public interest in this proposal. There were a number of concerns and issues raised, and since that time, we've been working on trying to address those and trying to figure that out. But the biggest thing that this does is that it provides density bonuses for projects that include affordable housing. Those density bonuses are either in allowing more units, some cases where we don't have density limitations like minimum lot areas per unit. It allows additional building height. And it also shortens the approval process, which is one of the things that we've heard and experienced with affordable housing, is that the longer it takes, the harder it is for those projects to verify and get approval for their various funding sources. And so shortening that is really critical for those projects coming online. As an example of this, we've already had one affordable housing project that went through an approval process with the Planning Commission last year that was canceled because it missed the deadlines to get their funding source, and they couldn't find alternative funding sources. And so we're looking at shortening that. We currently are working with a focus group that's made up of housing advocates, community members, developers, people who were opposed to the project, and some other neighborhood groups that we set up. We do have a manageable working group. Not everybody who wanted to be on it is on it, but the whole point of this group is to help potentially find some different solutions to the four main themes of issues. So those were lowering the level of affordability. The code said 80%. We're trying to get that down under 60% of AMI. And for those that don't know, that's the qualifying income to be these units, and still have the incentives be effective. The other is neighborhood impacts. So how this proposal may impact those neighborhoods, and working through some of those standards that we could add or modify to help address that. Enforcement of this, which is a huge thing, which we've known all along. And we're working with, and I've met with various cities around the country to try to figure out how they enforce similar provisions to make sure that we can do it as effectively as possible. And then the other is making sure that utilities in the city can handle the density, which we are certain it can. We want to put together the numbers so that we can demonstrate that. The other three big things that are at the staff level, we don't even have drafts of these yet, is implementing the ballpark station area plan that Councilmember Mono just mentioned being adopted, by updating the zoning around that station. This is actually something that is now kind of a requirement under state code. For track stations, we're basically supposed to have a station area plan and the associated zoning adopted around every track station that we have in the city. It also includes bus rapid transit, but we don't have any bus rapid transit in the city right now. So, but we have close to 50% of all the track stations. Fortunately, most of our stations already have a station area plan and have zoning already aligned along North Temple and 400 South. And the state code allows us cities to request exemptions from that, which we will be submitting for stations that are, for example, at the airport where we can't build housing, and on the those stations on the university campus where we don't control what's built. So just a heads up on those kinds of things that you're going to start seeing. We just are kicking off a analysis of the current general plan and zoning regulations for the 300 West corridor with a consultant that we got a transportation land use connection grant for. That'll be about a 12-month process to get that code to the point where it can go through the adoption process. But the intent of that is, we know the 300 West corridor is changing. The city has invested a ton of money in the ongoing rebuild of that street and adding particularly the protected bike lanes. And so we know it's a changing corridor, and we want to get the zoning and plan in place to help support that. And then several years ago, many of you probably might remember a project called Life on State. For various reasons, that plan never was adopted. We are going to hopefully in this next calendar year reinvigorate that plan and get it adopted along with some zoning changes along the State Street corridor, which requires kind of a surgical approach to do it because of how close in proximity some of our older, smaller scale neighborhoods are directly east of State, and then also west and in between State and Maine. So you can look forward to those types of things. And with that, I'm going to end so that Jason can talk about the Homeless Resource Center. And if there's questions, we have a few minutes. I think we can answer some questions.
I think you're muted, Christina.
Sorry. Yeah, so we have a couple of questions that were sort of, asked to us before the meeting, Nick.
Okay.
And of course, they're going to be about parking because, as we all know, parking is sticky subject. So let's see. I guess we'd like to kind of know how parking is going to affect 9th and 9th, especially the new development there. For example, what would change now? Like if somebody came in with a 2,000 square foot restaurant, what would it what would it be like now and what would it be like after the parking change?
Yeah. So the biggest thing in areas like 9th and 9th is that the old code had a number of ways where people could reduce their minimum parking requirement down almost to zero. And while that is good in many places, it also creates some very unique challenges when we have business districts very close to homes and things like that. And, we know that parking has always been a concern in the, particularly in the 9th and 9th area. There's other places where we have really popular restaurants that experience that same type of thing. And so what this proposal does is it still allows some reductions for certain types of things, like I said, with the affordable housing, but it limits the scope of those reductions. It also doesn't require a minimum parking for commercial uses on small lots. And so that is something that we wanted to retain so that we weren't seeing some of our buildings that provide great opportunities, particularly for small local businesses to be located in, from not being able to change a use, whether it, maybe it used to be like a small little retail store and somebody wants to add a little coffee shop to it. Well, under our old code, you'd have to add parking for that. And so a lot of those places just never changed, or they sat vacant. And so that was part of the goal. But I mentioned earlier that the parking maximums actually increased in neighborhood business districts like 9th and 9th. And that was because we did have some places that wanted to open up, but they needed and this isn't a lot, but they maybe needed 5 parking stalls, and they could only get 2 under our old code because of the size of their space. And so that was seen as an economic development concern and issue. So the takeaway is the elimination of the ways to reduce it, including being able to count the on-street spaces. You can't do that anymore. And then increasing the maximum.
Interesting. Okay, so we really appreciate the planning department being here with us tonight. And just speaking from ELPCO before we take any more questions, we are excited to use your presentation here in order to train our new board members and to make sure that people that we work with have this background, and our neighbors are able to, refer back to this presentation. And we think that it will, simplify, sort of provide a tutorial for people to get the basics before they get too worried, and I really appreciate you outlining everything so simply and concisely for us.
And we, Christina, we also do a planning zoning 101 for community councils. We're happy to come back at any time and provide that.
That's fantastic. I was kind of thinking after listening to you tonight that it will behoove us to talk to many of our neighbors, maybe go to door and see what people, have to say, and then ask them more thoughtful questions at some point down the road. So that can, and then bring you back for that 101. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone from the group have questions?
I have a question. I just had a question about the ADU limit. So you said that 9,000 square foot lot can be a multifamily. It can have shared, like shared living, like multiple units, single family in one, with one kitchen shared and stuff like that. And that's going to change to 2,000. Did I hear all that?
No, I think you might be mixing 2 different proposals.
Okay.
The shared housing is a different thing than an ADU. An ADU is basically like a backyard cottage or basement apartment or apartment over garage, something like that. And those you can have 1 per property. And then, like Michael said, there's under the recommendation the Planning Commission made that the City Council will consider is that maximum size can be up to 1,000 square feet. It can go up to 1,200 square feet if your property is more than 12,000 square feet. Is that right, Michael? So two different things there. There's still lot coverage requirements that you'd have to comply with. So not everyone's going to be able to have 1,000 square foot ADU.
What was the multifamily part of that then?
That was the shared housing proposal. So that's a different type of living. It's more similar to multifamily. It's not allowed in the, it's only allowed in our mixed use zoning district. So along tracks, downtown, in our commercial districts, things like that. It's not allowed in our residential zones.
So that's when I go to like Europe and I get, my wife and I get like a Airbnb or something, and we rent it for a couple nights, but we got to go, use the kitchen with 5 other guests, and there's 2 bathrooms to share between everybody, all the rooms.
It's similar to that.
Okay.
But it's more of a longer term housing situation.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Again, thank you. I really appreciate everyone being here. So I think we'll turn the time over to Jason now to speak to the HRC overlay. Jason, are you ready?
I am, although it's a little bit silly. I feel like I'm giving a book report with the author in the audience because
Yeah.
the folks who wrote this overlay are sitting right there. They're probably going to be noting down all the mistakes I make. But appreciate it, Nick, if you would chime in if I make a major blunder. ELPCO was invited along with other community councils to several stakeholder meetings where we learned about this process. Traditionally, homeless resource centers have been cited only in very narrow bands due to the previous zoning. Really along like in Ballpark and then a place way over in the far west of the city. Those are the only places that homeless resource centers could be. That's where they are right now, the 2 that are in Salt Lake City, as well as some other facilities related to them. So what's going on is that Salt Lake City is going to be changing the way that zoning approaches homeless resource centers, or even how homeless resource centers approach zoning. So instead of saying it can go here and it can't go there, what the planning department is proposing is what's called a zoning map overlay, which would allow basically takes away those restrictions of you can only be in specific zones, and it can be anywhere in the city, but it has to meet a lot of strict criteria in terms of its impact on the community, on police and fire resources, other public services, proximity to other homeless resource centers or other services that provide services to those that are homeless. And so it's a totally different approach. And this all came about because of a moratorium that has been in place in Salt Lake since about October 2021, basically giving the city some time to come up with a new plan. And that's what this new plan is. I will be putting some of that info in the chat. But one of the confusing concepts of this, of what exactly is a kind of a zoning map overlay or an overlay, and it basically means that you have your zoning, and then you basically apply another set of criteria on top of your traditional zoning, and then you see whether it fits or not. That's kind of the basic way to explain it. The one thing I will say that is also different is that traditionally homeless resource centers have been cited with through a conditional use process, which we're familiar with ADUs and a lot of other projects that come into our neighborhoods. This will change that so that it will no longer be a conditional use, but it will have to go through the Salt Lake City Planning Commission, and then newly it will have to go through the City Council. And that's an important determination here, is that it's actually going to go to elected officials to make the final determination about yes or no about whether or not this homeless resource center could be cited, which kind of adds a whole other dynamic to the approval process, puts it a little bit more into the political realm as well. So I will put up a little bit of info about that, including some links. But I think the major takeaways are that we are moving from if this passes and is approved without major changes, we're moving from a situation where homeless resource centers could be cited only in a narrow band of approved zoning districts to where they can be cited anywhere in the city, because it's a map that can apply, it's a zoning amendment that can be applied anywhere, but they have to meet some stricter criteria, the existing criteria as well as some newer criteria about whether or not they should be there. And the final decision comes down to the Salt Lake City Council. Nick, how would you grade me on that? Did I get maybe a B?
You did great.
Do you have anything to add, Nick?
I don't. The only, well, maybe I do. Not about anything that Jason said, but maybe about some of the upcoming things that we have going on associated with that. Given the tight time frame that the council put on us, so basically we have to have something transmitted to the council by January 31st. Otherwise, that former conditional use process kicks back in. So we have a number of engagement opportunities for people to participate that are coming up. One on November 1st, we're going to do a Facebook Live event, and all of these are going to be recorded with the videos posted on our project website, so people can watch these at any time and provide feedback. We'll also have an in-person open house on November 10th at the Public Safety Building. So more details of that are on the website, on our website at slcgov/planning. And then we're going to have a Planning Commission briefing on November 12th, where we're introducing this to the Planning Commission for the first time. And those are all good opportunities for people to learn about the proposal. And then we'll have a Planning Commission public hearing in December. And all those dates and information and ability to find out more and leave direct comments on this proposal are all on our access from our website.
Gotcha. And I did put up some of those links in the chat there. So about some of those upcoming events. And sorry, we had a little bit of a Zoom bomber. So we got rid of him though. So sorry if that was a little disruptive. We've actually had people trying to get into this meeting since we started. So we're popular.
Okay, well, I think that is the end of our planning section, unless we have any further questions from the people who are joining us. I don't see anything in the chat. But again, thank you, Nick and Michael, for joining us. I think that was very helpful. And I guess I'm sending it back to you, Jason.
No worries. Thank you, Christina, for handling that. You know, you could attend 25 hours worth of Salt Lake City planning commissions, or you could just listen to what we just listened to. That was an incredible summary from our planning department about stuff that has been going on for weeks and weeks and is really complex. And definitely appreciate their expertise and, you know, concise and clear way of explaining it to us. So thank you again for helping us out. We are now heading to the sort of final administrative aspects of our meeting tonight, including sort of swearing or nominating and hopefully approving a new chair for ELPCO. I've been the chair for the past 6 years. I'm stepping down after tonight, and I'm gracious that Christina Robb has willing to step up and take the helm. So the way we do this is she's been nominated. So I would be listening for a motion to approve Christina Robb as the new chair of ELPCO. Anybody want to make that?
I'll second the motion, Jason.
Got it. And Michael, did you make the motion?
I nominated her, so I don't know if I'm allowed.
You can still do it. We use Robbie's rules of order here, so that works. Okay, so we have a motion and seconded for Christina Robb to take over as chair of ELPCO. Let's do a vote. You can do your thumbs up or anything like that. We'll see if we can get people. You can do the thumbs up virtually as well. We do need a majority. I see a couple here. Okay, Darren, thanks. All right. Other folks?
I don't know if I'm allowed to vote because I don't live in ELPCO, but I'll vote anyway.
You know, yeah, we're good. Jeff's there. Okay, I think we're good. I think well, again, this is Robbie's rules of order. If you close your eye and look at it, it looks pretty good. But no, we do try to follow it. It is in our bylaws. I believe we can say the motion is passed. And Christina Robb is the new chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization. Congratulations, Christina.
Thank you. I look forward to serving all of us here in ELPCO. So we'll see how it goes. But I have a good predecessor that I've learned from. So do we have one more nomination, I think, for treasurer?
We do. Thank you for keeping me on track, already helping out. So Ann Weaver has been serving as the able treasurer of ELPCO for the past 2 years. She has agreed to continue on. So she's been nominated by that, and I'll entertain a motion to approve her as the treasurer for the next 2 years.
And I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Gotcha. Can we have a second? Michael,
I'll second
thank you.
it.
And Jeff, all right, let's do again, the thumbs up or aye, something like that. Okay. I think we're heading towards approval. Great, we've got a majority. All right, so Ann will continue as treasurer. And so far I haven't seen any yachts in her driveway, so I'm pretty sure that our funds are secure there. And we can still do things like our neighborhood boost grant. So that does conclude our meeting. I guess I do want to mention that our neighborhood boost grants are going to be happening again in 2023. We've had a great first year for that, giving $2,700 out to residents to do projects. The plaque project is about to get started in the 9th and 9th area. The first plaque should go up as soon as the weather improves a little bit on Tower Theater. And we got 3 more plaques in the pipeline commemorating the history of the 9th and 9th Business District. So I think that'll be pretty exciting. Is there any other business or any other issues, Christina?
Yep, I have one more thing to add, Jason. And of course, we want to send out our heartfelt appreciation to you for all the things you've done for ELPCO and for our community over the last 6 years. And, not just in this capacity, but all around. You are really, a special human being to put yourself out there time and time again for all of us. And to all of our listeners, people who are checking in, we're going to prepare a presentation for Jason at one of our future meetings, but that's taken us a little longer to prepare than we had just this autumn. So look forward to that. We'll publicize it and hope that we get a lot of you out to kind of see what we have in the works. All right, thank you all for coming. I think we're going to adjourn the meeting tonight, and we appreciate you all. Have a good weekend. And go Utes.